All right. Hello, everyone. So now we are officially live on all the platforms. So I'm streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So you'll see me looking back and forth as we go through just the topic today. So I'm going to be honest, I won't be very long here on the live today, but wanted to actually talk about this topic of dealing with disappointment. So I pull up a post on my social media pages, I think it was 2 days ago now, just talking about dealing just with residual disappointment. And I alluded to that. And I started off with talking about how my favorite scripture is Romans 8:28, says that all things work together for good to them that love God and answer the call to purpose. The reason why that is actually my favorite scripture is because of the fact that I have had some really devastating things happen in my life. And so, even in the midst of that devastation, I've been able to make it through because of the fact that, hey, God's purpose is greater than anything that I've been through, but there are also just some really practical things that I had to do as well. And so I want to just jump right into that today. So feel free to tag anyone in the comments, either on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram that you feel can benefit, from this message. Of course, I'm gonna be saving it live so they can go back and watch the replay if they miss it as well. So let's jump right into it. So the first step to really dealing with disappointment is to first give yourself the space to grieve, right? And these tips are going to sound so simplistic, but sometimes we miss the simple things that can actually end up having the huge impact that we need to have, right? And so the first thing is that you need to give yourself space to grieve, right? And so toxic positivity is a thing, where, of course, people mean well, but they'll try to invalidate what you are going through or what you're being impacted by not giving you the space to really deal with all the emotions that come to loss. And when we're talking about giving yourself to grieve, this is not just about grieving over someone, a friend or loved one who has passed away, who's no longer here with us, right? Grief can also occur when you lose anything, whether it's a loss of a job, whether it's a loss of an opportunity, whether it's a change in health status. It's that, the necessity for grief can happen anytime we experience this type of loss, right? Let's say if a friendship that you've had for several years has happened, or if you've gone through divorce, or you've been demoted at your job, just that loss or grief can happen when any type of loss actually occurs. And so it's important for you to give yourself time to really grieve and be honest about all the emotions that you have that's related to that loss, right? So first and foremost, you want to be honest about how this is impacting you, right? When it comes to talking about grief, is that you want to talk about, okay, am I grieving this loss because one, this is a relationship or opportunity that was in my life for a long time and it was excellent, it was really great, and now it's gone, and I'm not sure what my identity is or what's happening to it. Or let's say maybe if you're grieving the loss of the opportunity of improving things. So for instance, in a sense of a relationship, let's say if a parent passes away and you had a very strained relationship with that parent before they passed away, and now that they're gone, there's no opportunity to restore that relationship, right? And so you're not grieving something that was positive, you're actually grieving the hope or dream of something positive that can happen, right? And so giving yourself the space to really to be honest, to express all of the emotions, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, that's related to the particular loss that you've experienced. And so in giving yourself space to grieve, you're allowing yourself to be able to express things so that they're not bottled up inside. Because if they stay bottled up inside, then eventually it's going to come out in other ways anyway, right? And so when we're talking about grieving, I do want to say is that while everyone grieves differently, you do want to be mindful of what coping mechanisms that you do use to grieve, right? And so even in giving yourself to space, let's say if you take off of work for a few days, or if you take a break off of whatever, even for a few months, if you need to do that, is that you want to make sure that you're not using toxic behaviors to actually be able to grieve, right? And so you don't want to participate in behaviors that are actually end up being detrimental to you, whether that's emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, relationally. You want to be mindful of that even while you're acknowledging whatever loss that you've experienced that is causing the disappointment, that you're also not setting yourself up to then have to deal with even more things that you'll have to resolve because you're choosing to grieve in a way that is not healthy. And so you just want to be mindful of that. And so first, you got the first step, which is grief. So let's move to our next step. The next step with dealing with disappointment is that then you have to be honest about the right now and about the future. right? And so with being honest about the right now, you want to be honest about just really where you are, right? And so we're 5 days in 2024. And so let's say, oh, hey, Monique, shout out to you. Oh my gosh, I hope you're doing well. Happy New Year to you. So you want to be honest about what is your right now? What is your present situation, right? And so you want to try to focus on the facts, right? The facts of how you're feeling, the facts about the details of the circumstance that you're in. You want to be honest about your right now. Now, this is a very thin line to walk when we're talking about being honest about your right now, is because it can have you kind of getting to this point where you may fall into despair, right? And so even when we're talking about grieving, so the first step was grief. And being honest about your right now, you don't want to fall into despair, right? Grief is different from despair. Grief is about expressing just the loss of something that has happened to you. Despair then happens when you lose all hope, right? And so when you fall into despair, that means that you don't see any way for anything to be able to improve. You don't see any opportunity for your situation to improve. You think that everything is going to just be horrible for the rest of your life, right? So it's a permanent loss of hope. And so while you're being honest about your right now, you don't want to try to be honest through the perspective of despair, right? And so let's say if you lost your job, being honest about losing your job and saying, hey, I lost my job. This is going to impact my ability to be able to pay my bills and do, whatever things I had on my schedule when it came to meeting my financial goals for the year, right? Being honest about it from a perspective of despair would say, hey, I lost my job and I'll never be employed again. Right? So you see the difference where it's like, hey, being honest to say what's happening right now. Despair puts a permanent solution or a permanent perspective on something that really is actually temporary. So you want to be honest about your right now. The second part of being honest is that you want to be honest about your future. The truth of the matter is that you do have the capacity to be able to recover. The also part of that truth is that the time that it takes to recover may be longer than what you want, right? So depending on what's happening is that you may then have to actually take time to recover, where it may take you a few days, it may take you a few weeks, it may take you a few months, it may even take you a few years, depending on the complexity of the situation that you're dealing with that has resulted in your disappointment. And so even though the time frame may not be ideal, it may not be what you want, that still does not mean that you don't have the capacity to be able to do it, right? Or the ability to be able to do it. And so then you'll have to build up your capacity to then move and hope. And so being honest, you can't just be honest about the right now, because if you're just only honest about the right now, that means you're going to be stuck in disappointment, right? And so you're not going to be able to dig out of that hole of being in disappointment. All right, so let's move on to step number 3. So we had step number 1, where you want to allow yourself to grieve, right? But even with grieving, you don't want to fall into despair. Step number 2 is that you want to be honest about your right now as well as about your future, right? About your ability to be able to recover. The final step is to get support. Sometimes when we are dealing with disappointment is that we can feel embarrassed and we can have guilt and shame that's attached to that. And so it will prevent us from actually reaching out to get the help that we need. But it's really important for you to reach out and get help. And so this is either can be from a trusted friend or family member. If you do reach out to a friend or family member, please understand proper boundaries in doing that, right? One, your friend or your family member is not a licensed therapist, or let's say if they are like a licensed professional, depending on what industry they're in, there may be laws that actually prevent them from working with people that are close to them because of a conflict of interest. So you want to be mindful of that. But even if a conflict of interest is not there, you still don't want to put more burden and responsibility on them that you really should be putting on a professional, right? And so you may reach out to a friend or family, but make sure that you have proper boundaries in place when it comes to that. And then you may find that you need to reach out to a licensed professional to help you to navigate what you're going through, because they have the expertise to be able to deal with the reasons behind what put you in the situation that you're now dealing with this disappointment. But they also have the ability to be able to help to support and reignite your hope, right? All right, so let's do a quick recap then of the 3 tips that we talked about today. So first and foremost, give yourself space to grieve. Toxic positivity is a thing. If you are not allowing yourself the ability to fully and to healthily express your emotions, then what's happening is that you're going to keep suppressing, and then one day they're just going to just blow out, maybe in ways that you don't even want, right? Even in your grieving, you want to make sure that you are using healthy ways to be able to grieve. You don't want to use toxic things that actually end up being detrimental to your health, whether that's mental, emotional, or physical, or even spiritually, financially. Just make sure you're not using toxic ways to be able to deal with your grief. Secondly, you want to be honest. Be honest about your right now, what's happening, but also be honest about your ability to be able to recover from what's happening. And then thirdly, you want to reach out for help, whether that's from a trusted friend or family member with proper boundaries in place, or even reaching out to a licensed professional. So that is all that I have today for us when it comes to dealing with disappointment. I'll pause 1 second. I'm live on another device, so that's why you all see me looking both ways, where I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube right now. So if you have a question, you can definitely drop those in the chat. I'll answer those before I get off, as I'm waiting to see if there's any comments or questions. What I will do is let you know that I will be live tomorrow and doing a part 2 of this. So today we talked about dealing with disappointment. Tomorrow, what I'm going to do is actually come and talk about reclaiming hope, right? It's because if you only just stop at the disappointment, then it leaves you stuck. And then you are not actually equipping yourself to be able to have the capacity to not only deal with it right now, but to move through it and get to the end that you are actually hoping for. So the second part of dealing with disappointment is reclaiming your hope. So I don't see any questions or comments like in any of my social media platforms right now. If you're watching this on a replay, hey friend, you can drop your comments or questions in the chat, and I'll make sure to monitor those throughout the day. So tomorrow morning, I'll put out a post to let you all know what time I'll be live. We're talking about the second part of reclaiming hope. It'll be the same length, just about 10 or 15 minutes. We'll keep it brief. But this is great. It feels good to be back here. I used to go live like all the time. And then I had school and work and everything else. And so it did just affect my schedule to be able to do that. But Happy New Year to you all. I am praying the best for you. Oh, shout out to my mommy. Hey. My mom is watching, y'all. So shout out to everyone as we watching this on a replay. Thank you all for joining me live. I look forward to talking with you tomorrow, where we talk about part 2 with reclaiming hope. And that's it. So take care. Have an amazing day. Have a wonderful evening. And I look forward to talking with you all soon. Take care. Bye.